Live from Utah's Wasatch Front, the pulse of the Mountain West, where the issues that shape your life meet the truth that sets you free. Across Utah, across the Republic, and around the world, welcome. This is KMMU.
Hello, folks. This is Talk with Jon here on KMMU.org, Main Street Media, Utah. Looking forward to being with you here today and looking forward to having a great show. I'm going to introduce my guest momentarily, but first, I want to get out the show prayer and show mantra as I attempt to do at the start of every show. When it comes to doing this show, this is just my thoughts. This is kind of where I come from. So I'll start out with the show prayer. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it also be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra. Where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. Sorry. So muted my phone. But for the record, I was going back and forth with my producer. So, it's not like I was avoiding the show. All right, folks. So got a great show today. It is the third Tuesday of every month. And as we like to do, I like to bring on my next guest, but let me attempt to do a somewhat proper introduction of him. So David T. Pine, Esquire, is a former U.S. Army Combat Arms and Headquarters Staff Officer who was in charge of the armaments cooperation with the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas from 2000 to 2003. Wow, he covered a lot of stuff. With an MA in National Security Studies from Georgetown University, he is the former president and current deputy executive director of Task Force on National Homeland Security. He recently served as defense and foreign policy advisor to former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. He also co-authored the best-selling new book, Catastrophe Now, America's Last Chance to Avoid an EMP Disaster, and his new book, Restoring Strategic Deterrence, will be published in January 2026. He serves as the editor of the Real War newsletter at dpyne.substack.com. So D for David, and then Pine. So that's dpyne.substack.com. And he previously served as a contributor to the National Interest. And you can go to his Substack to find out more about him. Just one of my favorite guests. Frankly, he's an audience favorite guest. I have a number of people that talk to me when they talk to me about my show. They talk to me about David Pine. So, David, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate you being here.
Hey, Jon, great to be with you.
And, it's not like I'm wondering if we can figure out a way to talk about anything. Obviously, I say that tongue in cheek. There's a ton going on. And I want to get your thoughts on some domestic things as well as some foreign and national foreign news. But, folks, like I said, David Pine of the real news war, okay, let me go back. The Real War newsletter. Sorry, David, please forgive me. And folks, you definitely want to catch that. Go to dpyne.substack.com so you can interact with that, read it, and folks, it's worth your time. He puts out a lot of great information. So back on July 18th, I had him on my show, and then later that evening, he put out a Substack, and he's put 2 more Substacks out since then. And we will definitely be covering those today. But first, I want to get your thoughts on the domestic front, and more specifically, Donald Trump having the National Guard come to Washington, D.C., and having the Washington, D.C. back up the Washington, D.C. Metro Police. What are your thoughts? Any concerns? I'm going to say I have a little bit of a concern anytime I see the military get involved in something like this. But hey, you were an officer in the military. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I would say initially I had some concerns, but I mean, I've worked in DC before, and it wasn't as bad as it is now. It's just gotten to be a crime-ridden mess that's unlivable for its residents, and you don't really want to have that. I mean, Tucker Carlson, of course, former Fox News host, traveled to Moscow, found it to be, clean, modern, low crime. The Russians don't allow that, that level of crime in their capital. Why should we? I mean, we're supposed to be the example or paragon of, democracy and freedom. But yet, we can't, if you're the wrong race or something, or any race really, walk around, you can't, you're worried for your personal safety. I mean, there's congressional interns that have been murdered or assassinated in some instances, we know. So I support it. I think it's a good idea. It'll be interesting to see if how long is this deployment going to last? I think that's the real issue that you're probably concerned about is this going to be a permanent deployment that's where the troops, guard troops, rotate in and out. I mean, that's sad, but under the right president, I think that's not not something to be too worried about, especially where the guard units being rotated in are from multiple states. It's not. I don't know. I'm not too concerned about it overall. I think there's perhaps more benefits than.
Well, let me share with you my biggest concern. My biggest concern is not Donald Trump. It's not something going astray under Donald Trump. It's not. What concerns me the most by far is that we wind up having this used by the left to get some real tyrant in, and some real tyrant uses this. Or we get a Republican in there that's a Republican in name only, that's the president, and uses this for tyrannical. And it's just, hey, we've already established, hey, this was done under Donald Trump. Why are you guys complaining? And so that is number one. Number two, number three, number four reasons why is that I have the concern. Do I think that that this is actually, especially the way this is being implemented right now, do I think it's a problem? No, I don't. I actually think it's a very good thing. Hey, the news stories, the people that they're going and interviewing, even on some of the left-wing media, going in and interviewing people, just the person on the street, and they're like, hey, I love it. I can finally walk down the street, in peace, and I'm not concerned. We're hearing that from the left news media. And if that's being put out, so most likely this is actually being a very good thing. You're right. Let's not forget, hey, Gavin Newsom pretty much did the same thing when China came in. Now, this is another key piece is the left is saying, oh, the only reason why Donald Trump is doing this is because he had basically a G7 summit, including you and plus Ukraine, come in Monday, and he wanted to put on a good face for the nation. Well, Gavin Newsom directly said, oh yeah, when I had President Xi come in, that's the whole reason why I did it, as opposed to this was being done before that was even scheduled. Well, I don't know if it wasn't scheduled, but that really wasn't the thought process. And frankly, it seems like you're not hearing, you heard from the Californians themselves. Why did we stop? Why didn't we have this sooner? And why are we just doing it for President Xi? Hey, they're gone for the moment, right? Many of the G7 members, if I understand correctly, have already flown out. They may be back again soon because there may be more peace negotiations going on. But the bottom line is, this has never been stated that this was done for anything else but the American people themselves. So that's my whole thought with this?
Yeah, I mean, I've been more concerned with President Trump's kind of militarization of our foreign policy. For an America First president that said he's a peace president. It seems like his first instinct is to go to our military for a solution. In terms of the use of force, he's talked about using the military against the cartels in Mexico, and maybe that is justified. Certainly we have precedent for that. In our history, we've invaded Mexico a few times, I think, or a couple times before. Just a century ago. In search of Pancho Villa and various others. But those were, I think, more severe instances. I think it probably makes a lot more sense to use the military to guard our borders. For border control. That's something I'm really happy to see him using the military for. But on some other issues, and obviously with his unprovoked bombing of Iran, I've taken a major issue with him on that.
Okay, so my question when it comes to on the border, what should we do? Because this is my take. It's right on our border. It's something we're dealing with. It's coming into the United States. Now, let's not forget that there is a huge issue on the United States end, that there's a big demand, right? That's part of the problem. But I think that's an issue on how we fix. But part of the whole thing is they're using military tactics. They're using military style tactics to come into the United States. And in the interior of the United States, they're using military tactics. So I have no problem. So I'm going, okay, where's the problem of the United States going in and going into Mexico and possibly even other areas to take out the cartels? Where am I wrong? Where do you think we're wrong in doing that?
Well, it depends on how you do it. I mean, are we going to do drone strikes, to take, like we do pretty much everywhere else in the world outside of Russia and China, where we, use drones to assassinate, kind of Obama style, assassinate, terrorist leaders, anyone we deem to be a terrorist, including potentially U.S. citizens. I'm not sure that's a good look for our neighbors, for us to be doing that, when that's kind of what we're supposedly mad at Russia for doing. But we definitely agree wholeheartedly in terms of securing the border. Obviously, if a cartel unit fires from their side of the river, the Rio Grande, along our border with Mexico, I would totally support firing back, and using drones or strafing them or whatever the heck, whatever we have.
Puff the magic dragon,
grenades on them, or rocket launchers to take out their vehicles. But other than that, I'm still a little bit reluctant. I would think we should use maybe law enforcement, DEA, maybe FBI, deploy those to try to use some kind of trade sanctions. We could employ massive trade sanctions against any Mexican companies that are supporting the cartel or working with them extensively. So we can start kind of making a list of companies that we want to blacklist, in terms of trading with. I think that would be perhaps a better place to start. I'd also like to see better enforcement of our ports in terms of searching Chinese containers. I think we should. Currently we have 1% of all containers from container ships are actually inspected by the DHS, Border Control. I think that's woefully insufficient. When China could be pre-positioning nuclear cruise missiles in those containers. The Russians obviously have nuclear cruise missiles that can be launched from containers, that can be driven in diesel trucks to within range of DC or the Pentagon or US Stratcom. So I guess what I'm saying is I want to see Trump's focus beyond against communist China. We've got up to 100,000 military-age men in from China inside the U.S. We've got Chinese-owned farmlands. I think we need to, maybe use the National Guards to retake control of those farmlands, and then once we've deported all the Chinese nationals on those farmlands, we'll decide whether to reimburse them or not for the cost of the lands that we've retaken back. But that's really the greatest threat. It's not these the cartels. It's not rapists and murderers. It's the fact that 100,000 Chinese PLA troops, the equivalent of 2 PLA group armies, may be pre-positioning that could perhaps alone defeat the U.S. in a war without China firing a single missile from mainland China against us.
100,000. You said, okay, did I understand you correctly? 100,000 PLA troops here in the United States. I'm assuming you mean already right now.
That's correct. Yeah, for between October 2019 and 2024 or January 2025, there were an estimated 100,000 Chinese military-age nationals that came into the U.S. Estimated. It could be higher, but or it could be a little lower, but right around 100,000.
Okay. Do we have any word from? And this is a question that I want to ask Michael Letts on sometime. Is do we have? What are we doing about this? Because this is not something we're hearing in the news.
I don't think President Trump's doing anything about it.
Do you think
I don't.
Okay, so point number 2, from what I understand, he is not doing anything about it either. Point number 2 of mine, does President Trump even know it's a problem? Because this is my take when it comes to President Trump. He is very insulated. Who was it? It's a former FBI agent. I've heard recently, and I think he was a J6er, who's like, here's what happens with like Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, is they do what I think he used the term bubble wrap them, surround them with people, give them all the information you want to, so they spin their wheels, wake them up in the middle of the night. So especially, and he mentioned this about Donald Trump too. You wake him up in the middle of the night with missile launches going from one place to another. President, do you need to know? Do you want us to do anything about this? Just to let you know this is happening. So you feed him full of information, and you leave something out this big. My question is, do you think so? Bubble wrapping, that information is not being even given to him. Do you think he even knows?
I would say that he's likely been briefed on that threat to some extent, not to the extent that I've stated, but he certainly, I think, is aware of Chinese nationals having infiltrated into the United States. I think he's aware of the Chinese farmlands being positioned near U.S. military bases. But for whatever reason, I don't think U.S. intelligence is making that a high priority. I don't. Certainly at the congressional level, there's been some efforts to roll back Chinese control of those farmlands. Really, I think it's almost exclusively at the state level. We see some red Republican states that are trying to pass laws to end the sales, but what we're not seeing is any attempt to roll it back. Those Chinese farmlands are positioned near 17 key U.S. military bases, including where my neck of the woods, where I live. Over a third of Utah, I believe, is Chinese owned in terms of farmlands and whatnot. So we actually live in probably the state of the union that is the most Chinese owned. So that's
and the most Chinese influenced as well, potentially. I want to say you covered that with
Jason
Preston on his show, We Are the People, right? I think you covered that.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we had a good expose on that, in which I was the featured guest.
And on top of that, we've got it even goes all the way up to the church having a number of key people that they've brought in, from my understanding. So Now, I happen to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so I'm not saying my testimony's toast on that. But
yeah, I would disagree with that. I don't think the church has brought anyone in there. There was a Chinese spy who identified himself as a member of the church who tried to use church terminology to try to justify and excuse, Chinese influence operations within the state of Utah. But I've seen no church supported issues. I mean, certainly, the president of the church has been, actively trying to court Chinese officials to allow missionary work, to proceed within China to some limited extent, or at least reduce the persecution of Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints members and other Christians, Christian denominations within the People's Republic of China.
David, I would say you misspoke. Way for correcting me on that. You're right. My memory was a little foggy, and that as soon as you mentioned it, and I believe it's a guy that's up in Ogden or something like that. So yes, thanks you for putting me on the correct path. That is actually what I was speaking of. Okay, all right. So we definitely need to talk about China today too. But okay, so if Trump doesn't know, why do you think he doesn't know?
Well, again, I don't think it's that he doesn't know. I think that it's not on the priority list of U.S. intelligence, deep state intelligence. So when I was a student,
okay, so the key phrase is it's not a key point that the deep state is bringing in front of him, correct?
That's correct. So he's got daily briefers. He gets the presidential daily brief, which is a top secret brief, SCI perhaps. It's supposed to be Tulsi Gabbard that was supposed to be briefing him every day. It looks like it's defaulted to CIA Director John Ratcliffe, who's a neocon warmonger. But when I was back in 1999, when I was getting my second graduate degree at Georgetown University, a School of Foreign Service, I traveled to CIA headquarters and toured the CIA. And what was interesting is they had a threat board, and the threat board showed the top 5 threats. This was October of 1999, by the way. It was before the Twin Towers attack by Al-Qaeda. And it listed Al-Qaeda as the number 1 and number 4 threats, which I thought was kind of interesting that it was listed twice. But my point is, I don't think Chinese troops in the United States is one of the top 5 threats listed. It's usually foreign-based threats or terror-based threats, and they ought to consider Chinese troops as a terror-based threat, because it's not like a dozen major Iranian cells that could potentially do a moderate level terrorist attack. These troops could use weapons of mass destruction on our own soil, and we would have little to no warning before that occurred.
Okay, so that brings 2 thoughts to my mind. As I said, October 7th, the thing that concerns me about the most about October 7th is that playing out right here in the United States, and it coming from within the United States. Then when I saw Ukraine do the attack on Russia the way they did with that drone strike that was very famous, hitting the planes and so forth, it left a container. If I remember correctly, one of them is shown leaving a container. And now I don't know that it kept the signal on, showed the entire way, but the next thing you see is a plane blowing up. And I shared with you then, I saw that and I was like, that's the map right there for what I think China's going to do in the United States. Or China, the cartel. Basically, I bet you there's Russian assets here. We could have even Middle East assets here from many different countries that are willing to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely a clear and present danger to the United States. Some kind of Ukrainian type drone attack operation on the U.S. nuclear triad, or it could be an assassination operation where they launch, drones to take out U.S. political and military leaders, up to and including the President of the United States. The U.S. has a very poor defense system against drones. It's got, multi-layers of authorization, before they can, drones can be taken down. We saw that, during the last year of the Biden administration, where there's, drone swarms over key U.S. Air Force bases near the Capitol region, and Biden didn't authorize them to be shot down. So the commanding generals of those bases, typically Brigadier General, did not have authority to defend those bases from potentially, weapon-armed drones. According to, I think, Sean Hannity and some other Fox News hosts, that were the size of an SUV. So, SUV,
Right.
It's hard to imagine an SUV-sized drone, multiple SUV drones in the air over key U.S. military bases that are near the Capitol, and the U.S. did nothing about them. That brings to mind, of course, the Chinese stratospheric balloon, which was EMP or nuclear capable. It could have had a payload capacity of, I think, 2,000 pounds, perhaps even 3,000 pounds, which is the equivalent of a light bomber payload during World War II. And it could have had nukes, could have had hypersonic missiles on it, warheads, in a super EMP weapon that would have had, a limited impact in terms of regionally, because it wasn't high up enough. And we let it circumvent the entire United States. Now, obviously, Trump would never do that, and we haven't seen the drone swarms with Trump around, but the potential remains.
Well, if I also understand correctly, with that balloon, it didn't just like follow the air. It actually did a figure 8 pattern over some of our top missile installations. So it's not like it stayed. It just didn't have the air blowing around. No, it directed itself and where it was going. So yeah, real big concerns. And frankly, I think that could happen again. But to me, it's an even bigger concern that, as you said, only 1% of the containers are checked coming into the United States. What could China have in those containers? What could some other country? What could Iran have put in? I'm going to go. What could have Iran put in, or some other nefarious actor put in one of those containers, or the CIA or its cutouts? Obviously, the CIA wouldn't do it directly.
Yeah, well, Russia has Club K missiles that are supersonic, that are launched from containers, 4 per container. So 4 potentially nuclear-armed missiles, or even super EMP-armed missiles of ranges, I think, above 1,500 miles. Maybe actually 2,500 miles is, I think, the longest range version. And those could be parked by Iran, by China. I mean, Russia typically sells kind of dumbed down versions, not dumbed down, but low, lesser range versions of those. But even if it was just a 300-mile range version, and it was, parked in Virginia near Norfolk, or in range of the Pentagon or DC, or even at any port in the United States, and then parked on a diesel truck. Or even a mass drone attack, something with like 100 to 1,000 drones, where a trailer opens up and 100 drones, combat drones, fly out, suicide drones, and take out 10% of or 9% of our nuclear bomber fleet, like Ukraine purportedly did to Russia's.
I think that's very easy to happen, and it could happen. That's something you could set to have go off at the exact same moment all over the United States. How many containers are just sitting around in shipping
Thousands,
yards,
tens of thousands.
or on some truck been put on? I mean, how often do you go by a farm and see a container on it these days, right? I mean, it'd be real easy to put one of those missiles in a container in Nephi and have one of those drones or missiles fire off and hit Hill. I would love for it to take out the Pluffdell NSA data center. Oh boy, that would be terrible. But it can go and hit. You could have one of those missiles that would go and hit Tooele. There's plenty of places in Tooele County that could be parked. I mean, it could be parked anywhere. and you get them 200 miles away from the military. You get them 100 miles away from the military base. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody's thinking about anything like that. The only thing that keeps from something like that from happening is, in my opinion, the people following Christ and listening to Christ. And we're not doing a great job of that, David, right now. And, Talk with Jon is not always stellar at it himself.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. And we know the judgments of God are facing the United States unless we repent and turn back to the Savior, because they've been prophesied in the Bible and the Holy Scriptures. So, I've spent most of my life trying to postpone those judgments, but we know they're coming real close. Second coming's not far away.
Well, let's hit a few other points. So we're at 4 minutes and 4:39 right now. So we're 39 minutes into this. So we definitely are going to hit Putin, Trump, Ukraine, and the rest. But what are your thoughts on NVIDIA selling chips to China?
I think Trump he made a big mistake by authorizing those chip sales. I mean, during the good old years, we had something called ComCon, not to be confused with Comic-Con, in terms of all the cosplay folks, but
Right.
it was COM. I think it was COM, ECON, and it was basically an export control regime against the entire communist bloc. So we weren't allowed to give any dual-use military technology to our enemies. Certainly not Russia and its ally, the Warsaw Pact. But actually, Reagan did provide direct advanced U.S. military technology to communist China. And when I worked at the Defense Department, I actually review the original files from the mid 80s, in which it was discussed at the DoD level that whether we should build F-16 and M1 tank plants in China. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but he did share other advanced technology with China. But at some point, perhaps it was during the Carter, Ford, and Nixon years, we had strict controls on what we could sell to China. And then for a time, I think it was after Tiananmen Square, very briefly, I think we cut off those shipments. But Clinton, of course, gave nuclear missile GPS technology to China to reward them for helping, basically buying his presidency, helping him win the election with an infusion of $3 million in cash that helped him win the Democrat nomination in '92 as our first Chinese-controlled president. Biden, of course, being the second. So I think that was a mistake on Trump's part, and I don't really know the motivation for doing that. If that was supposed to be part of some deal, trade deal, that he would authorize more dual-use military technology to Beijing, but they're our biggest enemy. Unlike Russia, they're not a manufactured enemy; they're a real enemy. And as a real enemy, we need to have good relations with them, but we also don't want to sell them the rope with which to hang ourselves, as Lenin prophesied that we would.
The only thought that I have with selling them those chips is if the United States put codes in there to take control of the chips, then it's worth selling. And I'm sure China is like, well, we got to make sure that isn't happening. Now, when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code, all you need is a line or two. It's sometimes hard to pick out. And frankly, I think that's probably what's happened with a lot of chips that are made in China. I guarantee you a lot of the things that are made in maybe not a lot, but I can virtually guarantee some things that have been made in China have back doors to them. And I would bet, including a number of their power transformers, the real big power transformers probably have that in there. So real quickly, folks, I want to mention you are watching and listening to us on KMMU, Main Street Media, Utah. You can go to and watch us on, you can go to kmmu.org, and then there's a couple different things you can click on. You can click on the YouTube button, you can click on the X button or the Rumble button and watch today's show. You can share the link to today's show, and also you can watch a number of other shows that we've had in the past. Specifically, I would say you can watch some that we've had with David over the it's been over a year since we've been on, almost 2 years that we've been doing this. It'll be 2 years in January. So I've been having David as a regular guest. What are your thoughts on Donald Trump's work with Cambodia and Thailand?
Well, first I want to say that you raised a really good point about the motherboards, or about the chips. I went to a national security conference in New York back in February, and I met with one of the folks I met with was a former DHS employee or official, and she's a real good cyber expert. And she told me that she told everyone at the conference that China actually has sold, most U.S. weapon systems employ Chinese-built motherboards, which could potentially be used to either deactivate or even take control of U.S. weapon systems, such as the F-35 aircraft, drones, missiles. Just imagine, if the first strike, from China, if the U.S. came to defend Taiwan from a Chinese invasion or blockade, the Chinese first strike wasn't necessarily a cyber attack. It was deactivating our weapon systems or turning them on the U.S. So we were struck with our own drones and missiles. What a crazy thing that might be. So
I've had a few software engineers and hardware engineers over the years tell me, John, I'm not really worried about a nuclear war. I think China's just going to turn off those, either implement code or turn off code. And they turn off code on our electrical system. They don't need to do that. We're toast. We have no way of replacing everything. And everything goes down.
We've got 493 Chinese transformers, thanks to Obama and Biden in our power grid, which is about 11% of the total transformers in the grid. So you're absolutely right.
Okay, so I could see how. Let's go down this rabbit hole for just a moment. You said 11%. I could see how someone would be like, okay, that means just 11% of our power is down. Now that's significant, and there's a lot of people. But hey, we can do roving blackouts and brownouts and things along those lines. What would happen if 11% if all those went down offline all at once? What would happen, David?
I think it would take down our entire grid. There was an expose on 60 Minutes. In which it was stated that if an enemy knew 9 of our key substations and took those out, we'd lose power in the entire grid for 3 weeks. There's at least 55,000 to 60,000 substations in the grid. So I don't know, I haven't run the percentage, but it's got to be like 0.1%, max. If it was just the key substations that someone had that information, which is pretty certain that China has that information, taken out through terrorist attacks, kinetic strikes, hacking, cyber attacks, even just turning off some of those transformers. We could lose the grid for 3 weeks. And if we lose the grid for more than 3 weeks, then it's basically it's a grid down situation that could last much, much longer.
Then we got chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, inner cities, even if you have all of your year's food supply and so forth, there's plenty of people that there's probably 20% of the population that has, maybe not 20%, but 10% of the population, maybe 20% here in Utah that has 3 weeks food supply. Yeah, but still everybody else is going crazy. That's bad news. So let's hit Donald Trump in Cambodia, settling that peace. Do you think it was worth a Nobel Peace Prize or being mentioned for one? What are your thoughts there?
Well, Trump has boasted that he's shut down 6 wars, and I think one of those wars at least was of his own making in terms of the 2-day war with Iran. But I'm a big fan of of the U.S. using its diplomatic heft to help make peace around the world. So I strongly commend them for trying for successfully getting that peace agreement with Cambodia and Thailand as well.
I absolutely do as well. Your thoughts on Trump putting tariffs, and I said tariffs. I misspelled a word when I sent the talking points over to you. But what are your thoughts on Trump's tariffs with India because of buying gas and from Russia?
I think it's incredibly foolish, to do secondary tariffs on any country. Thank heavens he didn't do that against all the countries. I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of tariffs against China. The agreement that he negotiated with them, it's not great, but it's decent. We have 55% tariffs on Chinese goods, and they have, I want to say, 67% is or maybe no 77% of equivalent tariffs on us. So it's still lopsided in their favor. But in the case of India, I mean, we're supposedly trying to get India away from Russia's orbit and try to have them as some kind of strategic partner against China. And instead, Trump pushed them further into China's arms. He basically got India to cancel its defense secretary meeting with Rubio, or not Rubio, Hegseth, where the two defense secretaries from India and the U.S. would meet. He got them to reportedly, and this is not fully corroborated, but he got them to cancel U.S. arms purchases, and then he got the Prime Minister of India, Modi, to go to China. I think it's Beijing for the first time in 7 years. In China and India, they have a new border agreement so that they don't have any active conflicts. But as recently as 2020, China was taking over some border regions, just several kilometers of Indian territory that's disputed, and they were having shooting at each other. So, Trump really needs to stay focused on policies that will divide our enemies, not bring them together, as Joe Biden did.
So, how do we get countries like India to lower their tariffs on the United States, or do you think it's even worth worrying about?
Well, I'm a big fan of Trump's reciprocal tariffs. My only complaint is that they didn't last very long. We had Liberation Day on April 2nd, and then he suspended, virtually all of the tariffs for 90 days. And I think that's been extended with regards to China. Other countries have gotten away with murder. I think Vietnam has like 96% tariffs against U.S. goods. And for a time, we had 48% against them. So that even the tariffs that he did, they were called reciprocal, but they were only half reciprocal. So he basically took, whatever the country's tariff is on us, we tariff them half, whatever, we split it in half and tariff them just half of what they tariffed us, except with China. I think, that's where it was more equalized, and rightly so. But, I think we absolutely should tariff India at the exact same rate they tariff us. I think that's great. I would support a policy that just an executive order that Trump issues and says any country in the world that tariffs us, we'll tariff them at the exact same rate. So that's the way you get other countries to reduce their tariffs, is if you have an automatic tariff system, that reciprocal tariff system that automatically matches whatever their tariffs are. Then they'll want to reduce their tariffs so they can get more access to the U.S. market.
Okay, folks, should you want to ask David a question, feel free to call in at 385-899-2134. That's 385-899-2134. We actually have a producer / call screener with us today, so we can take your calls should you want to jump on. Our lonely call screener is waiting for you to call in, and you can ask David or I a question. All right, let's hit one more thing. October's coming up, and if I remember correctly, October is one of the months that the seas in between China and Taiwan are their calmest. what are your thoughts on the chances that something could happen this year? Also, so I'm gonna actually share with the audience. I posed two things to him on this, but I think I'm gonna wrap it into one question. Do you think China might be encouraging Russia to extend this war as long as they can? And this is a question that I've heard posed by many conservatives, as long as they can, so China can prepare for invading Taiwan. Now, I know you've shared me with your thought on that, and then we'll also throw in October's coming up. What are your thoughts on China and Taiwan? Do you think something's going to happen?
Yeah, so I think that China absolutely does want Russia to extend the war. I think they might be a little more subtle about it, because what they want Russia to feel, Russian President Vladimir Putin to feel is that China's supporting whatever they decide, essentially, as their closest military ally. But certainly their interest is that the war continue as long as possible, and in fact. I think they'd love to see, Russia get into a shooting war with the U.S. and NATO, because that would be the optimum time for them to invade and capture Taiwan without any real threat of U.S. military response. With the U.S. being bogged down there. So, and that applies to Iran as well. If the U.S. were to get into a months-long shooting match with Iran, where U.S. ships were being sunk, thousands of U.S. troops were being killed. There was Iranian cyber attacks on the U.S. homeland. I mean, that's going to be a guaranteed time that China would make their move to take Taiwan. So they're kind of biding their time for that opportunity. But I really do think that 2027 is kind of the drop dead date for China to retake Taiwan by force. There's also, and as you mentioned, October is basically it's one of the 2 months where the sea state in the Taiwan Strait is the calmest. Every 6 months, Taiwan's government and military gets a little gun shy, or there's some trepidation, is wondering if this is the year, or this is the month for China to invade. In terms of a blockade, they can do that any month of the year and force Taiwan's capitulation, probably within like 3 weeks, barring some kind of U.S. military response to try to break the blockade. But in terms of invasion, it would most likely be around the April or October timeframe. So basically, early October would be the next threat time frame that we would face for that.
What would be a Okay, so you start seeing a bunch of ships by China going into the sea there, into the sea lanes between the two of them. What are the things that you'd go, uh-oh, something's happening, they're coming? At what point do you go, this is happening?
So China's had some recent massive military exercises. They had one, I think, in the October or November timeframe. They had one in early April. It was actually April 1st. And, I had made some predictions that was a possibility that, where they could blockade or stage a joint amphibious air assault invasion of Taiwan in the early April timeframe. So, one of those exercises reportedly had 150 PLA ships, not just PLA Navy ships, but also maritime militia and Coast Guard ships. So those are the three basically maritime or naval based ships that they have, and it's the last two, the Coast Guard and the Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia, that would be in charge of kind of manning a blockade. They're lightly armed ships, but they would be used for kind of enforcing the blockade. And then the Chinese Navy ships would be deployed at a range, kind of a range a little bit farther away from Taiwan to guard against outside interference. So during the last operation, I think it was on April 1st, for that exercise, they did have those ships deploying and practicing a full blockade. At the same time, they had PLA, Air Force, Navy, and ground forces actually live fire exercises, including amphibious tanks landing on Chinese shores in Fujian province, just 100 miles away from Taiwan.
I don't know if you read this, and I want to say it was about 6 months ago. There was an article, and I can't remember where I saw it, but they talked about the United States had a number of unmanned subs off of the Taiwan coast. Do you think that that China has any concerns about that?
I'm unaware of any heavily armed unmanned underwater unmanned vehicles that we have near China. We could have those. Obviously, they wouldn't be nuclear armed, so I think they would pose a fairly minimal threat to China if they went to war against Taiwan.
If I see, I remember thinking I should send this to David. Shame on me for not doing so. So, all right. Well, let's get to your last 3 newsletters. Let's start with so I'm going to read off the newsletters. I'm going to read off the headlines to them and the subline, and I'll just go oldest to newest, and then you tell me where you want to go. How Trump can negotiate a just and lasting peace to end his unwinnable proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. Trump is transformed from a peace president to a war president, alienating his conservative voting base, but it's not too late for him to reverse course and go back to putting America first. Okay, that was on July 18th. This is August 9th's headline, and then sublines. Trump and Putin reached deal on Ukraine war peace framework. Trump to meet with Putin in Alaska on August 15th after Russia offers sweeping concessions while Zelensky continues to insist on his maximalist objectives, vowing to oppose the deal. Then August 15th, this is the headline of the last of your 3 newsletters that you put out since we last spoke. Trump and Putin will likely sign a peace framework agreement in Anchorage today. It could be a reverse Yalta in which Russia recognizes a U.S. sphere of influence over all of NATO for the first time and transform Russia from an adversary to a strategic partner. So where would you like to start?
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend Trump for reading my July 18th article and tacking back to the America First position and deciding to make peace with Russia. I think that was a great move on his part. I'm joking, of course, but
someone obviously gave that to him so he could change his mind. Well done, David, on changing his mind. I'm going to commend you.
Yeah, well, I actually did get one of my peace proposals to one of Trump's cabinet members, and we know she read it. We don't know if I don't think it got past her, but at least she was considering it. No, I don't think Trump read what I wrote, but he basically implemented my approach, and that is to find some minimally acceptable compromise with Russia and with Putin. And he did a great job of that. In terms of I'd written that Russia didn't accept the Kellogg plan, which was a 22-point plan, which was up until that date, it was the only attempt, a meaningful attempt on the part of the Trump administration to find a compromise with Russia, where they accepted maybe half or less of Russia's key demands, and then basically decided to ignore them when they said we need these few additions, and then we got a deal. They ignored him for 3.5 months, or I guess 3 months. Decided to align with the neocons and Zelensky and pretty much do their bidding, do Zelensky's bidding from essentially the 2nd of May to August 6th. But we had this new approach. We had this new approach from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And basically that new approach appears to be what ended up being an exchange of peace offers on August 6th during the Steve Witkoff's 6th or 7th trip to meet with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And that's what led, of course, to the August 15th summit. It's unclear as to who gave the counteroffer first. I think maybe it was the U.S. that gave a counteroffer, asking for Russia to give up its territorial demands with regards to the Ukrainian regions of Zaporozhye and Kherson, and then just accept the remainder of the Donbass and Luhansk. So basically, Russia currently controls 99.5% of Luhansk. So basically all of Luhansk, and then about 76.3% of Donetsk region. And that's ended up being kind of the main point of dispute on the part of Zelensky and EU leaders who met with Trump in the White House yesterday. But essentially, Trump and Putin, I believe, came to a deal. It was a tentative deal, and it was a deal that Trump basically told Putin it was conditional upon Zelensky approving it, or at least being consulted about it. And that's why the deal didn't get signed. But I think the deal was 90% finalized at the end of the meeting. And I was sorry to see it didn't get signed, because I think the only way that peace is going to be achieved, it's not by Russia and Ukraine meeting together. It's by Trump meeting with Putin. And thankfully, I think Trump's learned a lot that Putin does want peace. He's made some sweeping concessions in terms of Russia's terms that they've been demanding. He's reportedly just with giving up Kherson and the Zaporozhye in terms of the Ukrainian-held territories in those regions, he's given up over 2/3 of his territorial demands in terms of Ukraine, surrendering additional territory. So that's a tremendous victory on the part of President Trump, and I want to commend him on that. And then he also got Putin to give up, a few other demands. According to Steve Witkoff, Russia has now agreed to Article 5's like guarantees, security guarantees for Ukraine, where
Okay, I want to stop you there.
Okay.
I guarantee probably many of my listeners know what that Article 5 guarantees are. Has to do with NATO, but instead of talk with John possibly messing that up, what is an Article 5 concession like, making it Article 5 like, as far as when it comes to NATO and Russia?
Yeah, so Article 5 refers to the Atlantic Treaty, which was the founding treaty of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in 1949, when it was organized as an alliance of Western countries against Soviet aggression during the early stages of the Cold War. And basically what it says is an attack on all shall be considered an attack on, one country.
Yeah.
NATO member state shall be considered an attack on all. And each NATO member state will have deliberations within their parliament or Congress to take all measures they deem necessary to respond to such aggression. So we hear from the neocons that's like an ironclad agreement, the most ironclad agreement in the whole world. It commits the U.S. to go to war on behalf of tiny countries like Estonia or South Macedonia or Montenegro. If those countries get struck by a Russian drone, then we have to go to nuclear war with Russia. It doesn't mean anything like that. Russia could invade Poland and all the Baltic countries simultaneously, which are actually in Finland. So they currently border on 5 Eastern European countries. with the expansion of NATO to Finland. And they could invade all those countries, and the U.S. could respond by sending a single bullet or a single rifle, or even a strongly worded letter to Putin, and that would be meeting our obligations under Article 5. So it's actually pretty meaningless, is what I'm trying to say. It's basically, it means whatever the president of the who's in the White House at the time of a Russian attack thinks that it means. It doesn't take away any of our sovereignty in terms of our strategic flexibility to choose our own response to a Russian attack. Now the problem is, we now, thanks to President Biden, Joe Biden, we've gone from having 5,000 troops in Eastern Europe at the start of his administration under Trump. Trump deployed and Obama both deployed 5,000 troops to Eastern Europe, stupidly, and then Biden deployed an additional 15,000. So what I'm saying is, if Russia were to invade Lithuania, for example, and try to take control of the Suwalki Gap, which would cut off all of the Baltic states from the rest of NATO, then they could potentially kill U.S. troops, in the region. And then, Trump would come under tremendous pressure from Congress to basically, if not declare war, to go to war with Russia and, maybe bomb advancing Russian tank formations. So get us into a nuclear war with Russia. So that's why it's important for, as Russia has stated, for us to address the root causes of the NATO, NATO proxy war against Russia and Ukraine that was started by Joe Biden, and pull those troops out, because the presence of those troops are actually a violation to solemn commitments we made to the Russians at the time that a treaty was signed with Russia to reunite Germany in 1990.
I also go, am I extremely confident that France will jump in and help whomever? Not really. How confident am I in Germany to join in the fight? Maybe a little bit more confident. Britain, I think if the United States goes to war, there's a good chance that Britain will join in. But there's a lot of countries that something happens, my confidence isn't super high that all those countries will join in with action. What are your thoughts on that?
When President Trump first came to office, he actually talked about taking the U.S. out of the military command structure of NATO, and making the NATO commander a British or French general instead of a U.S. general. And that was a signal that he was maybe going to use the French model, which was basically to keep the U.S. as a kind of a member of the political structure of NATO, but not the military structure of NATO. So we would essentially be taking ourselves out of the military command structure of NATO, so that we could retain our strategic flexibility, in the event that some hothead EU leader, sent troops into Ukraine and, started World War III. We could remain neutral and kind of withdraw U.S. forces from the borderlands of the Russian Federation. So, but you're right. I think Britain for sure would get involved. They've made ironclad military treaties with Poland, with Ukraine. They're been led by worse hotheads than Joe Biden in terms of trying to provoke Russia to attack them. Keir Starmer, his three immediate predecessors, especially Boris Johnson, were at the forefront of wanting to have World War III with Russia, and they still are. They're still trying to provoke World War III with Russia. They opposed, Trump's initial demand for a ceasefire with Russia until Trump forced them to agree to it. They're now, opposing Trump's call for peace with Russia, any peace that gives Russia even, a sliver of additional Ukrainian territory. They're going to torpedo that. They want the war to continue indefinitely. They've basically made pronunciations. They want the war to continue through the end of 2028. in the belief, in the hope that Kamala Harris or some other Democrat, far left globalist Democrat will replace Trump as president, and then they can keep fighting the war indefinitely, and in the hopes of weakening Russia. The problem is that Biden's war in Ukraine has immensely strengthened Russia. Not just in terms of economically. They've got catapulted from the 6th largest economy in the world to the 4th largest. They're now ahead of Japan and Germany in terms of purchase power parity.
Wow.
They spend more than all 30 European NATO members combined in terms of purchase power parity defense spending.
And does that include the United States as well?
No.
Okay.
No, Russia spends about 54% of what we spend on defense.
Okay, so something that I think sometimes that number is a little tricky. They may spend 54% of what we spend, but what does that 54% get them as far as actual production?
Well, it gets them a military that's with potentially more active duty forces than the U.S. military. Number one, it gets them a nuclear arsenal that's over 7 times larger than ours.
I would assume so. Kind of what I'm getting, and please continue down this path because it matters. But my point is, for China to produce a ship and for the United States to produce the same quote unquote same type of ship, it's much more expensive for the United States to do it. It's much more expensive let's say, hey, we're going to have what's a common cannon shell size? Is it 110 millimeters or something like that?
155 millimeter howitzer, yeah.
155 millimeter round being produced in the United States and one being produced in the Soviet Union. I'm going to guess that is a much different price tag on each. Probably the United States one is 3 to 4 times as much as the one in Russia. Would I be correct?
Yeah, I think during World War II, famously, I think we were producing a B-24 bomber on average every hour of the day. Now it takes us, this isn't a true comparison, but it takes us 3 days to produce a single howitzer shell, and
3 days,
3 days per shell. So that's not a fair comparison. Those are two different things because B-24s we were producing thousands a year. Maybe more, right. And we're producing tens of thousands of shells a year. But just the fact that it takes us 3 days per shell, it ought to take us hours to produce a shell. If we were, had mass production, we're on a peacetime economy. We've militarized Russia's economy, so their economy it does have inflation, interest rates are high, but it's been growing too much essentially. So we've got it to, they're mass producing at wartime rates. They're producing 1,000 to 1,500 T-90M tanks, main battle tanks per year. The U.S. hasn't produced
how many again?
Up to 1,500 T-90M main battle tanks a year. So the U.S., but by point of reference, the U.S. hasn't built a new tank from scratch since the Cold War, essentially since like 1992. What we do is we take old 1980s tanks and A1 tanks, and we essentially rebuild them into a more advanced model by digitizing the electronics to the M1A2 or M1A2 SEP level. But we haven't produced any new nuclear warheads from scratch since 1992. We haven't produced a single tank from scratch since 1992. And yet Russia is building, thousands of tanks, thousands of armored vehicles. They're producing drones at, 100,000 or more a year. Missiles, all kinds of nuclear capable missiles in much greater quantities than the U.S. has. So what I'm saying is we're really at a disadvantage. If the U.S. were to go to war with Russia today, Russia versus NATO, Russia would win. And they could potentially win without even using, a massive cyber attack, just in terms of electronic warfare. And really, they would have to use a cyber attack, but they could without even using and detonating a single nuclear weapon, they likely could defeat us.
Okay, so one thing that we're, on one side, I'm hearing nuclear war is right around the corner. From one side of the conservatives to the other side of the conservatives, there's no way that Russia would go to a nuclear attack, and that we can and frankly, that's has been one of the stated statements from NATO is, well, can we turn this into a 30-year war and keep it conventional, and just turn it, to and help us, and that I forget where I heard this from, but it was like, hey, one of their goals is to do a 30-year war, keep it conventional, and it would help bring back the NATO economies by doing that. Any thoughts there? And then my other question is what's NATO's thought process on how if they're building 1,500 tanks, how is the United States going to fight against that? How is NATO going to fight against that? I would assume at some point we've got to have a little bit of tank on tank duel. Yeah, you've got the Warthog, you've got the Apache, and things along those lines. And then a third question I have for you is, how long does it? You may not know, and you may not be able to share these things, but how long does it take an Apache? Say like someone calls. Say like there was to be an attack here in the United States, how long does it arm and to get an Apache in the air fully armed? So,
yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I did have exercises when I was an armor officer where we were having our tanks, like a tank company, exercising underneath Apache gunships at Fort Knox. But I don't know how long I'm not an aviation specialist by any means. I think that I think the U.S. is way behind the power curve. Britain has about 148 total tanks in their entire military. They've got like 63,000 men in their army. Russia has an army of I would say about 750,000 men, just ground forces alone. Actually, if you include forces that are ground forces but aren't officially part of their army, it's probably 850,000 or more. And so, Russia is producing 10 times as many tanks as Britain has, a year as Britain has in its entire army.
Yeah.
And, right down the line, France and Germany, France is a little bit better off. Germany is a little bit better off. Poland's got probably the most troops of any NATO country outside of Turkey and the United States. But none of that's going to really matter. Basically, as Colonel Douglas MacArthur, he sometimes not MacArthur, McGregor, Colonel Douglas McGregor has stated, basically NATO, EU nations have what amount to like constabulary armies, which are basically armies that are good at, marching in unison or going down a military parade, driving in formation or something like that. They're not really made to fight a war in terms of, their capabilities. Germany has stated they don't have enough troops in their military to send any troops to Ukraine. Britain and France, it was requested by Zelensky that they send, 250,000 peacekeepers to Ukraine after a ceasefire has been operationalized. And basically, they admitted they could only send a force of 20,000 total max. Britain could send 5,000 to 10,000 troops to Ukraine to serve as peacekeepers, and France could send maybe 10,000. So basically, all those forces would be as a tripwire that would guarantee, war with Britain and France and probably all of NATO combined. As soon as they enter the country. And Russia's basically stated as much. They've stated that if any NATO country officially sends troops into Ukraine, those units will be priority number one. It won't be Ukrainian troops. It'll be those NATO troops that Russia targets immediately and destroys. I don't think they've said that per se, but that's essentially what would happen. And another thing I want to bring up is that NATO has perhaps, I think, about 2 weeks of ammo and munitions, in terms of intense combat before they ran out of ammo. So basically, all Russia would have to do is, they start a war, they invade
Yeah.
the Baltics, and then they fight a bunch of NATO units get deployed there, and NATO runs out of ammo, and then Russia keeps pounding NATO countries because they have all the ammo they needed, because
Right.
they've got 4.4 million rounds of 152 ammo that they've imported from North Korea. They've got North Korea is now talking about tripling the number of troops in Ukraine, with Russia deployed on the border from 11,000 to I think 34,000 from a division to corps level. They've got other allies. I mean, China, of course, has at least 200 troops deployed near the front. They could send a few divisions easily. I mean, they have the largest army in the world. So, we need to stop thinking about threatening countries like Russia that could destroy us within minutes with a super EMP weapon or with a massive cyber attack, because we're gambling with the survival not only of our country but our own citizens.
So here's another question that just comes to my mind is, let's just say that for some reason war breaks out and we're able to keep it conventional. Is the tech of NATO, is the tech of the United States good enough to combat those 1,500 tanks that they're producing per year?
No, absolutely not. I mean, Russia started out.
Now, wait a minute. Whoa. You've got the tanks there behind you on your cabinet. Very nice cabinets. And that kind of was the area that you were in. Were you ever told, hey, our tech is so much better? Or so you're that was a very fast no. That was it is what I got from you. It was a very fast no. You're tanks. What are we thinking?
Well, yeah, I was in the Army from 1992 to 1995, and that was after the fall of the Soviet Union. And Russian forces were still, I mean, they had a huge military post-war, post-Cold War, but they were mostly lower technology. I mean, we were trained about the vulnerabilities of T-72 tanks. So they had to reload. They had to raise the cannon, take it off target. They had reloaders that could reload, but then once to reload, they had to. It would take them a while, and they would be vulnerable. So. Absolutely, back then it was true. We did have better technology. In the Russians, they've had higher technology in other areas like nuclear weapons and missiles technology, and maybe particle beams and that type of stuff. But overall, we had a higher technology military. That's just not the case anymore. And this tank the beige tank is essentially is an M1. The other tank is a Type 99, which is China's mainstay tank. And along with the T90, those tanks are relatively comparable in terms of capabilities to the Abrams. I think our tank crews are better man for man. Certainly they're better, but in terms of weapon systems and capabilities, tank wise, it's pretty comparable. So I think, if we had equal numbers of tanks, on each side, I think the U.S. would prevail. But that's not the case. I mean, Russia and China together have a lot more tanks than we do. So if we had all of our tanks versus all of their tanks, we would be overwhelmed by numbers. And that's pretty much the case right down the line. I've written that China's manufacturing capability is likely, in terms of purchase power parity, it's almost 4 times bigger than the United States, which essentially translates to them being able, and actually in terms of militarily, their capabilities are much larger than that. That's just their total industrial base. But in terms of defense industrial base, they can produce 5 to 6 times more advanced weapon systems than we can, or rather they can produce them 5 to 6 times faster. We know they can produce ships at a rate 232 times faster.
Say that again. How much faster?
Okay, this is according to a top secret, classified data link by Airman First Class Teixeira on Discord. this was, I think it was early last year, and it was revealed that the U.S. Naval Intelligence estimates that China has the capacity to build ships 232 times faster than we can. So
not 200%, 200 or 300 times, right?
232 times faster than the U.S. can.
Jiminy crickets.
So just imagine, during World War II, we completely crushed Japan because basically it was the same thing. We had our manufacturing base militarily around 4 times larger than Japan's. So we produced 150 aircraft carriers in 3.5 years, and right down the line with other weapon systems and ships. We had a Navy that had 8,000 ships. Today it's right around 280, 285 max. So our Navy is much smaller. China has their merchant marine is 63 times larger than ours. And so what a merchant marine does during war is it serves as the supply ships for naval and amphibious operations. So Taiwan is located 81 times. Let's see. I want to say it's about 81 times closer to the China's mainland than Taiwan is the U.S. So they're way closer. They have 63 times more supply ships. They would outnumber us about 10 to 1 in terms of ships in the South China Sea region. Because we only deploy about 15% of our naval and air assets in the Western Pacific and East Asia region. So they would outnumber us massively in terms of naval and air power. Their supply ships are massively larger. We don't have the supply ships to supply our ships. In fact, we stopped having the capability to supply our ships in our forward deployed ships. So they actually we're trying to create that capability, but unless this has changed in the last year, our ships have to go back to port to rearm and reload and refuel, whereas that typically was done by military naval supply ships on station.
That puts the United States at huge disadvantage. About the time they show up, they can be there for about 5 minutes, fire everything off, and then they got to head back. And plus, they have a whole lot. China has a whole lot more ships. They just follow us back to port, right? And then just take the port out, take us out while we're at port.
Yeah, it's not only that, but congressional war games showed that we would run out of long range precision munitions within 7 days of intense combat operations. So basically, we start a war with China over Taiwan. We fire off all our missiles. We run out of air defense missiles. So what do? If we keep our ships there, China just rains down anti-ship missiles, sinks our entire Pacific fleet to the bottom of the sea, and we basically have to surrender, on Chinese terms, or we just pull those ships out and try to, stage, long-range bomber attacks against their ships, hoping our bombers don't get shut down, and missile strikes. So we're reportedly sending Typhoon missiles, which are intermediate range missiles to the Philippines, or at least that's the plan. So we'll have some missile strike capabilities, but in terms of our ships in the water, we're going to have to position those outside of the second island chain just to ensure their very survival.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is if the United States goes to war with China or with Russia, and when I say the United States, I am saying NATO, we're smoked in 2 weeks.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, definitely with China. That's why I'm so opposed to the U.S. going to war to defend Taiwan. It's just not only do we not have sufficient strategic interests in defending Taiwan in terms of it being just a relatively small island that's a little bit larger than Moldova off the coast of the Chinese coast. If they were to take that, it wouldn't really increase their wouldn't give them a major strategic advantage over us. They already have control of the Taiwan Straits. If we go to war with them, minimally we just lose our entire Pacific fleet. And then with Russia, it'd be mainly a cyber attack where, they stage a massive cyber attack on the U.S. and European NATO, and then Western civilization just collapses. Basically the entire West would collapse, and Russian forces could start advancing all the way to their central Germany if they wanted to over time.
Okay, so let's get back to a little bit of so we've talked a lot about what it would look like if we can't get a peace deal and it gets hotter. We've discussed a lot what that looks like, and I think when my show's done, I'm gonna go kiss my kids goodbye, and I'm gonna go in a corner in a closet and suck my thumb. Okay, I won't really do that, but I mean, basically what I'm hearing is it's not good if we go to war. So let's talk about what happened Monday. Trump Saturday or Friday. First of all, good move or bad move on Trump's part of flying the B-2, the F-22s and F-35s. Big deal, no deal. What are your thoughts on that flying over and having the fighter jets lined up along the runway where Putin walked up? Your thoughts there on that?
Well, I think it was kind of insulting by Trump to Putin, kind of a power move in terms of, typically there's an honor guard that greets a head of state. So there's a U.S. military honor guard. That wasn't present. There was typically they played the national anthems of both countries as they stand at attention. That didn't happen. And then Trump had the adolescent move of flying a B-2 and F-35 escorts over Putin's head, and he hears this whoosh sound and he looks up in the sky like, what's going on? And then he smiles awkwardly, but it was a stupid move. That went against the very theme of the Trump summit, which the Trump summit was awesome. It was excellent. It went great. It was a smashing success. Would have been more successful if he was willing, had the courage to make a deal with Putin and sign the deal without Ukrainian okay. Because basically he to one sort or another he's essentially outsourced Russia policy to Zelensky, and that hasn't gone so great. We got real close to World War III. The Russians almost used nuclear weapons in response to a U.S. Suggested offensive in the Kherson region in September of 2022. So almost had a nuclear war. It's the theme of the Trump-Putin summit was awesome. I think it was like progressing to peace or something of that nature. But flying B-2s over the head of Russia's president with when they have over 7 times more nukes than we do, and they could destroy DC in 4 to 5 minutes before Trump could get on Air Force One and take out all 3 of our nuclear footballs, so we couldn't fire back for at least a week or more. If there was any nukes left, which I don't think there would be, I think they would give Russia plenty of time to nuke all of our nuclear missiles, is not the best idea.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know that was a great move, Donald Trump. I think that was not the wisest thing to do. So I'm going to give it to Putin on that. He handled it well. He swallowed his pride, handled it well. Okay, let's fast forward to Monday. The European leaders take forever to start showing up. Everything gets started late. And the meeting with Zelensky in the office, JD Vance wasn't in the that I didn't see JD Vance there, and he definitely didn't get any time from piping up. What are your thoughts on how Monday went with the NATO leaders and with Zelensky?
So I was very happy with the meeting between Putin and Trump. I thought that went really well. Yesterday's meeting, I wasn't very happy about that. I think that It was clear that Trump was unwilling to pressure Zelensky to come to terms with Russia. I think that the trilateral summit idea is premature. If he's not going to pressure Zelensky to make a deal with Russia, then all those those meetings may or may not happen. I mean, I'm not sure they'll even happen because what's the rationale? Ukraine and Russia are very far apart in terms of peace terms. Again, Trump seems to be outsourcing, his end of the war policy, his peace policy to Zelensky, and both Zelensky and EU leaders, they are adamantly opposed to ending the war. They want the killing of Ukrainians to continue indefinitely. Responding to a previous question you had as to whether we could, European NATO countries could fight a 30-year proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. The answer is no, because Ukrainian forces are already showing signs of potential collapse in the key Donetsk region, where Russian forces are in the process of encircling the critically important city of Pokrovsk. So even if Trump decides not to pressure Zelensky to give up the Donetsk region to Russia, which they don't control, they only control 76%, then Russia is likely to be able to take it anyway. And they could potentially take all of Donetsk and be advancing towards the Dnipro, or even reinvading Kyiv Oblast by early November and knocking Ukraine out of the war and forcing Zelensky to capitulate on much worse terms that are being offered right now. And what's interesting, let me just make this one point. There's a Zapad 2025 joint military exercises that Russia is planning in Belarus in mid-September, and they're already deploying large-scale Russian formations for those exercises. And NATO is estimating that Russia is going to deploy as many, this is with Belarusian troops, up to 150,000 troops, which would be positioned to reinvade Kyiv and potentially partially surround or even fully surround Kyiv with armored forces to deliver the coup de grace essentially to the Zelensky regime.
So here's another thing. Right now, I think the ground around Ukraine is pretty good for tanks to move around, troop movements and so forth. But it gets the rainy season comes in, it gets pretty muddy, and then the ground freezes. And I think I can't remember exactly when the timing of that is, but I could see by the beginning of next year Russian forces right outside of Kiev.
Yeah, I mean, the mud season starts in early November, so that's why I mentioned the early November date. But what people don't realize is that the Russian military currently outnumbers Ukraine inside of Ukraine by about 2 to 1. They also have at least 150,000 reserve troops deployed on Russia's border with Ukraine that could be used to reinvade Kyiv. And basically, if Putin wanted to, he could take 250,000 Russian troops to invade Kyiv and basically knock out Ukraine out of force them to capitulate within 3 weeks. So it's very deceptive. We have all these talking heads on Fox News, the neocon warmongers, and they're basically saying that Russia has only been able to capture 19.1% of Ukraine. After having 27% of Ukraine's territory at the beginning of the war, essentially within the first few weeks before Putin ordered a unilateral withdrawal of Russian troops from 30% of Russian-occupied territory when he thought that peace was about to be signed with the Istanbul Agreement on April 9th of 2022. And, and that's true. But what they don't mention is that Ukraine has lost 2 million casualties versus Russia losing about 300,000.
How many casualties?
According to the Jamestown Foundation, Ukraine has suffered 750,000 troops dead and 1.25 million wounded, of which 750,000 are seriously wounded and unable to return to the front.
So 750,000 out of 2 million. If my math's right, that leaves you 500,000 that might be able to refight. So, wow.
That's correct.
So how many troops does Ukraine have? Do they estimate?
I think Ukraine has about 320,000 to 350,000 troops left in their army. Zelensky claims that they have 850,000 troops, and we know that Russia has 640,000 troops. That's a figure that's been estimated on both sides, Russia and Ukraine. So according to Zelensky, Ukraine orders the Ukrainian army enjoys battlefield superiority in terms of troop quantity all along the front. But yet we've seen the New York Times and Washington Post report that it's actually a 5-1 Russian advantage along key areas of the front line in southeast Ukraine. So
you buy those numbers?
Ukraine, no, Zelensky's numbers are complete fabricated.
Okay, so you said Washington Post and I forget the other one says that it's a 5-1 advantage for Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe those numbers?
Yes. Yeah. So it's been well reported that Ukraine has been running out of infantry to the point where some of the fortified positions that Russian troops have overrun were unmanned. Ukraine didn't, they built a fortified line in the Donbass region. They can't even man it. According to David Axe, who's very much pro Zelensky, pro Ukraine, he's written that in most of the sections of the front or large parts links of the front, Ukraine only has 8 troops to man to defend 1 kilometer of front line, where they should have 200. So that's, what is that? That's like I think 16% of what they should have, or some I think it's 4%.
Yeah, it's 4%. If they have if it's 200,
yeah.
So it's anywhere from 3 to 4% of what you're supposed to have. So if it's 6 to 8 troops, and you're supposed to have 200,000, now
it's supposed to have 200.
200, yeah. Excuse me, just 200. That means that's like 3 to 4% of what you're supposed to have. That's not good.
Yeah, so
that's really bad.
What that means is Russian troops can infiltrate, basically through the lines and surround those 8 troops on the kilometer front and just run right through. So even within
so if you had 8 troops that you had to get past, would you even care about them? Wouldn't you just keep on going?
Yeah, absolutely. And if Russia wanted to, use some kind of northern offensive to overrun Donetsk and all the Ukrainian army troops in Donetsk, they could do that. They could invade through Sumy or the Kursk region. Sorry, not the Kursk region, Kharkiv region, and surround, the entire Donbass region and bag, a couple 100,000 Ukrainian troops, I guess, maybe 150 realistically. To 200,000, assuming they didn't escape. They would, a lot of those would likely escape through, if Ukraine allowed them to retreat, or rather Zelensky, because Zelensky is given kind of this Hitler-esque no retreat order where he's been trying to defend every inch of ground against advancing Russian forces, which is causing, this massive casualty ratio, which is so heavily weighted in Russia's favor.
All right. Let me take a breather real quick. Folks, you are watching David Pine and myself, John of Talk with John, here on KMMU Main Street Media, Utah. We are live on YouTube, X, and Rumble. Our website is kmmu.org, and you can search your favorite shows on KMMU on kmmu.org. Such as Talk with John, and we've got a number of great programs, Gowd, the folks. So, number of great programs that you can go to and you can see. Also, our lonely call screener, he would be willing to take your call at 385-899-2134. Should you have any questions that I have not thought of. All right, so David. Let's go back to, you said you were not real happy with the way the NATO leaders handled and what happened with President Zelensky Monday at the White House. Okay, so what were your issues of what they said, didn't say, what they did or they didn't do, and what do you think the likelihood of us getting a lasting peace there is? You know, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm sick and tired of the United States treasure going over and helping Ukraine. Now, someone I very much respect, someone I very much trust, someone I've listened to for 25 years, Joel Skousen, is like, no, we need to help. So, you know, we've got people, and frankly, you know, he's been one of the most ones that has been a great conservative, but I'm like, I just don't. I'm sick and tired of our taxes going over and helping out Ukraine. What can be done? So first of all, so two parts. First part, what did you not like about NATO, the NATO leaders being there? Should they have been there in the first place? And what happened with you with Zelensky? I mean, he was a lot more passive. He came in wearing a suit. It might have been all black, but he came in wearing a suit. There's a part of me that goes, you're wearing an all black suit and you're trying not to prove that you're SS.
And a t-shirt. I think you got a t-shirt underneath the suit.
Yeah. So your thoughts?
Well, first, you brought up Joel Skousen. So Joel Skousen and I both spoke to a group in Highland, the Highland group here in Utah, back in, I think it was 2023. I spoke first. The next time I had mentioned his name in passing that I disagree with on one issue. He then spent 40-minute diatribe, badgering me, and lied about me, at the very next meeting, which was in December of 2023. And I published a great expose on all the areas he was wrong. So, I used to like Joel Skousen. A lot of his stuff I agreed with. But I think that he's dead wrong in Ukraine. He's supported Biden's war in Ukraine to the hilt. He's wanted to. He's claimed that, like Rubio and others, that we need to send more arms to Ukraine. That we're going to weaken Russia, and we're doing so without any risk whatsoever of nuclear war, which is really, really odd because he claims that World War III with Russia and China is inevitable, but at the same time he thinks that we can launch long-range missiles. We can help Ukraine bomb their nuclear triad and launch long-range missiles in the Moscow region that are U.S. Or Western built, and he doesn't think that causes any risk of nuclear war. So I just wanted to mention that before I respond to your question. But what was your question again?
To those that think that we should stay in this war, why should we keep in it? To me, I'm just like, I'm sick. I think we're spending too much money. I'm like, Monroe Doctrine, let alone, I'm going to mention, you're in my religious background, is being members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Well, they're, something that we read as scripture, Book of Mormon, whether it's fable or whether it's scripture, it teaches non-aggressiveness. And as soon as you become aggressive, it's doomsday. And so there's a part of me that's just like, but just even the Monroe Doctrine, we need to stay here in our hemisphere. We have way overextended ourselves.
Yeah.
What do we do?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I've been saying since at least 2003 that U.S. should stop being a global superpower and return to be a hemispheric power. The debate during World War II, before Pearl Harbor, wasn't between the isolationists and the internationalists. It was between the global hegemonists and the hemispheric hegemonists. And I count myself as a hemispheric hegemonist. I want to see the U.S. dominate the entire Western Hemisphere, both the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, obviously to the second island chain. China's Navy is way bigger than ours in the Pacific, so we don't want to egress in their neck of the woods because it's just not feasible, and it provokes them to potentially, start a war with us or attack us. But what I said in 2003 is the best way we could divide the Sino-Russian alliance is, at the time I said, withdraw 75% of our troops from Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia. Essentially, the reason that we've got into all these wars is because we have substantial military forces in the Eurasian supercontinent. So if we were to withdraw those troops, withdraw them to the Western Hemisphere, some Pacific islands, Caribbean islands, Atlantic islands, whatever the case might be, or even Greenland and Iceland, which, I'm happy to see us annex Greenland. I totally support that.
Okay, you totally support what?
Trump's idea to annex Greenland, or at least bring it under U.S. military control, unofficially. I think that would be a great move. And then if we were to do that, then maybe Russia and China might see each other as more rivals than us. Right now we've created a real big threat picture for them to see us as the biggest threat, and so they have a lot of reasons, a lot in common. To ally against us and to be plotting our destruction in the event we ever attack them. So, the best way to defend our citizens, our 286 million citizens, and 50 million non-citizens here in the United States, is to 51 million. I had to mention that because a lot of people think that we see all these people claim, including Republicans, claiming, oh, we have 336 million Americans. No, we don't.
No.
51 million of them are non-citizens, 25 million are illegals, 25 million are legal resident or legal immigrants. But they always identify the illegals as Americans, basically. Right. And that's what Pelosi and other Democrats have come out and said. No, they're just undocumented Americans.
Right. Undocumented citizens or whatever their diatribe happens to be for that time.
Yeah, that would include 100,000 PLA soldiers, I guess.
Yes,
they're Americans. Yes. Just undocumented.
They're undocumented Americans that happen to be PLA soldiers. Yeah. Okay, so anything good come out of Monday? And do you have any hope from Monday? And what does Trump need to do?
Yeah.
Yes. And if we can sneak this in, and I don't know that we can, the prayer or the vision at Valley Forge by George Washington is ringing in my mind. So it's 5:55. I don't know if we'll have time to fit all of that in, but any good moments from Monday, and what does Trump need to do? Any good signs?
So EU leaders were really afraid of sending Zelensky by himself to meet with Trump because they knew how badly that went last time. J.D. Vance obviously tore him a new one because Zelensky accused Trump twice of parroting Putin's talking points, quote unquote. It went well in terms of Zelensky and Trump were respectful of each other. They clearly don't really have a friendship. They're not friends. On the other hand, Trump and Putin had a very friendly meeting. They greeted each other very warmly, and that went really well. The EU leaders basically showed up to talk Trump out of going with Russia in terms of the demand for additional Ukrainian territory in the Donbass region. I think Trump's really motivated. He's more motivated than ever to try to seal the deal with the trilateral meeting. I think he still doesn't understand that unless he pressures Zelensky, there won't be a peace deal, like ever, until Russian forces have broken through Ukrainian lines are advancing towards the Dnipro River, largely unopposed with the following Ukrainian military collapse. So really, the answer to your question, this is my fifth interview I've given in the last basically 24 plus hours on this topic. Is that it's all in the hands of Donald Trump. If Donald Trump wants it, basically the Truth Social post he said about Zelensky is true about himself as well. He said that if Zelensky chooses, he could almost immediately end the war in Ukraine. And that's true about Trump because Trump has all the power. Trump could threaten Zelensky to cut off his Starlink access and force him to sign, whatever deal that he negotiated with Vladimir Putin, and that would be the end of the war because the Ukraine's fronts would collapse. Russian forces would be able to advance without opposition from Ukraine's drone army, with the exception of their fiber optic cable drones, which they've been mass producing in larger quantities. And then, it would be game over essentially for Ukraine. So that's really the only way is threatening Zelensky because he's so hard-headed, he's so stubborn. He thinks he can he views himself as the leader of a great power. In fact, it's a non-nuclear power. It's much smaller than it used to be. It was Ukraine's lost 37% of its population since 2014, when Biden provoked Russia to invade the first time with the Maidan coup. And so that's really the key. And so the only question is, how does Trump respond when there's no progress? So there's almost zero progress with all these meetings. Maybe the meetings won't even happen. Is he going to respond the right way by putting America first and telling, reading the riot act to Zelensky and EU leaders that are, America last, trying to, continue this war indefinitely? Or will he simply, kind of go along and say, okay, well, we'll keep selling you arms, and I guess we'll keep having U.S. troops and missile technicians in Ukraine, and then if a war happens, if World War III happens, oh well, at least they tried.
I think there's a piece of this that Zelensky knows exactly what's going on, and he just wants the money and he wants the power, and he's afraid that if he gives up, things go south on him and he doesn't keep people happy, he's done for. He's gone. He's toast.
Yeah, Zelensky knows. That's why he's so adamant against a peace deal with Russia. And you could see it on his face as Trump was talking about, how Putin wants peace and they just need to get together and negotiate a deal. You could see Zelensky making faces, kind of shaking his head slightly. I watched a body language expert kind of interpret the things that made Zelensky mad, and one of them was Putin wants peace, and another one was they just need to get together and hammer this out. And you could see Zelensky kind of smirking dismissively. His words said differently, but often body language tells more than the words that come out of your mouth. And he clearly has no interest in meeting with Putin and has no interest in negotiating a peace deal with Russia. But you're absolutely right. He is. His main goal is to remain dictator of Ukraine as long as possible, to preserve his power. He enjoys it. He enjoys being, international celebrity, having him and his wife appear on the pages of Vogue, the front page, giving speeches to Congress, to the EU Parliament, as a big shot. He views himself as the leader of a great power, at the same level as Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin or President Xi of China. And Ukraine is it's a medium power, and it's
a speed bump.
It's a medium power with a decreasing size military. They're losing over 50,000 troops in terms of killed, seriously wounded, and deserters every month. So their army keeps getting smaller. They're only recruiting about 30,000 a month.
Well,
those are force mobilized troops.
And the other thing is, he's losing popularity, starting to lose popularity in Kiev as well, or is in Ukraine.
Yeah,
okay,
it's lower 9%.
So my concern with Donald Trump not ending this fast enough and us not getting done with this is George Washington supposedly had a dream at Valley Forge, and I want to say it was not written down by George Washington. It was written down by a colonel of his that sometime in the future the United States would be under attack on the west from the bear and on the east from the dragon. And I'm like, this is playing right into that dream if we're not careful.
Yeah, I've heard that dream before. and I don't recall the details, but we have LDS prophecies as well that talk about invading armies here in the United States. So that those prophecies will likely materialize at some point, and we just want to have a president that pursues policies that tries not to provoke enemy armies to invade us. But again, we already have a couple PLA group armies, dispersed throughout the U.S. homeland, so that could be a problem.
Yeah. Well, David, we are now 3 minutes past 6 o'clock. I told you I'd have you on till 6. So, any last thoughts?
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on again. Yeah, I really enjoy our in-depth monthly discussions and interviews. Most of my interviews are 30 to 60 minutes, so I get to kind of expand, and it seems like we always run out of time, even with 2 hours of discussion. There's always more to talk about.
Yes. There are things left on the table, folks, believe it or not. There were things that we were like, well, let's cover, we might run out of time. Let's cover this and this and this. And I hope that we get to those again in the future. Let's hope that this all winds down, and then, this peace deal that gets done, so we get to some of the other stuff like Israel, Putin, so forth, and your thoughts there. So then I'm going to say, David Pine, thank you so much for joining me. Folks, please go to his Substack. So I'm going to give that out right now. His Substack is at dpyne.substack.com. He is the editor of the Real War newsletter. And once again, you can go there and get all of his great articles. He's put out 3 of them since we last spoke. So he'll probably have 1 or 2 more coming up. So, David, thank you for being a great American. God bless you, sir. Thank you so much for being on Talk with Jon. It's been my pleasure. Anything else you want to mention? Otherwise, I'm going to say, our producer says, thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, as well. Thanks to you again. You're a great patriot, and I look forward to speaking with you again in the next few weeks.
See it the third Tuesday of every month. It's David Pine time, as far as I'm concerned. All right.
The big show.
We will, pardon me?
The big show, right?
The big show. We'll talk to you then. Folks, this has been Talk with Jon. Thank you so much for joining us.